Good afternoon, guys. As we said we would talk about this week, we're going to talk about carbs, carbohydrates. What are they? Well, they're not little fairies that sneak into your wardrobe at night and sew all your clothes tighter. Those would be calories. But carbs are important, but often demonized. Not always for good reason. There's three big constituents we want to look for in our diet: macronutrients: fats, protein, and carbohydrates. So your protein is the one that we often talk about people don't eat enough of. It helps muscle building, it helps muscle recovery and muscle synthesis. So it's very good to get enough protein in your diet to keep your muscles around the same or getting larger so they can burn more calories. Fats are generally required for your body's hormones to work, which is why you have essential fats. They are important in the right quantities. And carbohydrates are, the easiest way to call them is an energy source. Now, the balance of these three things, you obviously want a balanced diet that contains all of them. One of the things people frequently overeat on and frequently get actually addicted to is carbohydrates. When people have a food addiction, it is most of the time actually to carbohydrates, to sugars, to processed carbohydrates in particular, because that sugar it's addictive. And not all carbs are bad, but it is generally the thing we see people eat the most of. There's more calories in fat, yes, but it's usually very easy to eat a lot of calories from your carbs. So what are carbs? Carbs are, well, your proteins would be your meats, your eggs, your fish, that kind of food. Your fats is a little more obvious. It would be like the fat on the meat. It would be butters and oils. There's a lot of fat in nuts, for example, as well, and those would be fats. Carbohydrates, now there's trace amounts in everything. I mean, there's half a carb in every egg, or in that kind of ballpark. Carbohydrates would be fruit, potatoes, rice, oats. Those we call more natural, minimally processed carbs. And your processed carbs would be chocolates, crisps, bread, and so on and so forth. There's a general rule I like to say actually when people are talking about the food they eat and how many calories they have. If the food is processed, there is generally going to be more calories in it. It's going to be denser. Because one of the things you do when you take something like, we'll take an example, peanuts, just to give you an example. You eat the peanuts, you actually burn a lot of calories by the mastication, which is the chewing, and it's obviously not fully down, it's not down to small pieces. So your stomach has to do a lot of work to break down those nuts even further to travel through your digestive system. If you take something like peanut butter in comparison, that's already been broken down. That's already been broken down by a machine. So you've removed that entire step, possibly two steps, from your body's system, which means it needs less calories to burn to get that food into your system. So as a general rule, the closer something is to its natural state, the less calories it's going to put into your system at the end of it because of the processes. So one of the things we do like to say is when people are talking about carbs is carbs are not bad, but the kind of carbs you have might not be ideal. Minimally processed carbs, which are your fruit, your potatoes, your rice, oats would be another reasonable example. They generally are much slower to digest, which is why often people will have their porridge in the morning and it keeps them full for a long time. It takes a long time for your body to break down those oats and get the energy out of them. They're generally higher in fiber, which again, fiber, there's different types of fiber, but the main fiber we're talking about would be insoluble. So it's the thing that your body actually can't break it down. So it takes up space in your stomach, it makes you feel full, but then it passes through. Probably don't need to go into detail with that. You get the benefit of feeling full without having taken in all those calories. So if you are talking about carbs, try to distinguish between, I don't like to call them good carbs and bad carbs. Everything has its function. But minimally processed carbs, your fruit, your potatoes, your rice, your oats, things like this, things that are closer to nature, are generally going to keep you fuller for longer, and will usually have less calories if you weigh them out. The other side of it then are processed carbs. The ones that spring to mind most often people get caught on are bread, and chocolate comes up a lot. I suppose crisps are a processed carb as well. So things like this, they're processed, so there's often additives in them. They're broken down already, so your body needs to do less work to get the energy in, and usually they're closer to a sugar form. So they are faster to digest, so you do get a little kick out of them. This is where we're talking about sugar spikes, but that also means that whereas the minimally processed carb, the more natural one, will have like a steady up down through your system, the bread or the chocolate is going to be spike up and spike down. So it's not really great for the energy levels. That doesn't mean there's not a place for it. If you want to gain weight, actually a good option. There was a good coach in America used to say one upon a time, he said, for gaining weight, eating clean is not a viable option. Big Macs are. Not always the approach we want to push, but sometimes if you're eating clean, it can be difficult to put weight on if that is your goal. And eating more breads, maybe eating chocolates, in the right kind of balance with the right kind of foods can be a good option. Bodybuilders will often have something like a protein shake with glucose or maltodextrin mixed in with it, and that's effectively pure sugar for the exact same reason. And for the same thing as well is if you were an athlete, if you were doing a lot of events. I used to be a fencer years ago, didn't want to be eating a big heavy meal of pasta and rice before going out on a fencing strip and doing multiple competitions over the day. I want to hurl. It would be just too much in my stomach. So often you would take smaller things. It might even be squares of chocolate, Coca-Cola, because it's easy for the body to digest. It's quick energy. You're burning it off anyways in that circumstance. So you can't say that one way of treating carbs is the same for everyone. The next thing people ask is, like, when should I eat my carbs? For most people, one of the best times to have carbohydrates is after a workout. Carbs, as I said, they're an energy source. So, and this is a gross simplification, but what often happens during a workout is the glucose in your muscles gets depleted. After your workout, if you eat something with carbohydrates within that hour, it's going to go into your body. Your body's going to go, the muscles don't have much fuel in them. Let's put the carbs in there. That's a good place for them. So you don't actually put fat on. If you eat carbs at another time of the day where you haven't worked out, where you're well rested and well recovered, the carbs go into the body looks at it and goes, well, we don't need that right now, so let's stick it down into the fat stores. Oversimplification, but it's actually not far off. So people are telling us, like, how do I use this information? There's a couple of different things you can do. One thing is to look at the type of carbs you're eating and how much of them. Often what can be good is energy is very closely related to carbs. If you're eating a very low carb diet and you were finding it difficult to get the energy in the gym, we probably don't want to remove the carbs in your diet. We probably want to maybe add more, but the right kind of carbs, depending on where you're at. Another thing that works very well for some people is that they need that balance where they need the energy to get through the workout, so they do need the carbs in the morning, but they also want to try to lose weight. And a system that works very well with this is what we call carb cycling. It's pretty simple. You would eat normal and maybe a bit more carbs on your training days. So if you're training Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you would have your carbs on those days. On your non-training days, you would eat very little or much lower carbs. And it's not that carbs are bad, it's just that people find it difficult to get the portions right, frequently eat too many calories with them. So by reducing that, it's going to net effect help you lose weight over the week. So those are the one or two things we wanted to kind of cover with carbs, and just based on what people were asking me. So it is, yes, it's important. If you're finding you're quite depleted in energy, one of the things you can look at, well, if you've already assessed your sleep, which is the number one thing, and how much coffee you're drinking, which is probably my problem, you can start to look at what your carbohydrate intake like. And if you're still having trouble losing weight, a good recommendation would be really scale back on what kind of carbs you're on the carbs on your non-training days. And don't be afraid to experiment. The key to this is everybody has a different approach that's going to suit them. We had one gent in here last year, lost a power of weight, several stone over a few months, and one of the things he did was intermittent fasting. He was eating very, 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 very little for a day or two. And we have other people that simply does not work. You have things like ketogenic diet, which we might talk about next week. I think we already covered it when we talked about the protein. I'll review my notes. And that can be actually a really good thing if you're having trouble with carbs, because it effectively eliminates that food group. And what you need to get over an addiction is to actually leave that addiction outside for a while. It's very difficult to give up a food addiction while still eating food. But if you can eliminate that one food group that is causing you the problem, that could help. That's a slightly extreme approach, and I don't really feel like everyone needs to take an extreme approach. So one or two things you could try if you're trying to lose weight is try to replace any carbs in your diet that are processed for more non-processed carbs. So try to scale back on your chocolate, scale back on your bread and your crisps and things like this, and try to have a bit more, say, fruit or potatoes or rice or oats. Second thing you can do is, if you are going to have that chocolate, if you are going to have that bread, or if you feel you need the treat, have it within an hour of your workout. That's the best time for your body to take it in and use it. And the third thing you can do, if you want to try it, is try to scale back the amount of carbs you are having on your non-training days. So if you're training Monday, Wednesday, Friday, on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, you would be eating much less carbs. Now, people ask us sometimes, what's alcohol? Alcohol is different. We wouldn't call it a macronutrient because it's not really an essential part of your diet. But for all intents and purposes, when people are trying to fit their diet for a weekend, we say treat alcohol like a carb. The calories are obviously not the same, but you drink less alcohol, you have a few less carbs, you'll get drunk quicker, and it'll kind of half balance out a bit. Okay, so best of luck, guys. Thanks for tuning in again. Sure, we'll be back next week. And if anyone has any questions, again, don't be afraid. Send a message to the page. I know people often say things when they're in here as well. Don't be afraid to say something to myself or Dave, or, well, Tom's not here this week. He's on holidays. Hello, Tom. And again, don't be afraid to send a message to the page or put a comment on the video. Thanks again, guys. Have a nice day.